The evening began like so many others. I had just wrapped up a long day at the office, drained from endless meetings and a weight of responsibilities. Deciding to skip cooking, I stopped by a cozy Italian restaurant I had been meaning to try for months. Its warm lighting and the inviting aroma of garlic and basil promised a brief respite from the chaos of the day. I stepped inside, glancing around for a quiet table. That's when my world shifted. There, at a secluded corner table partially hidden behind a cluster of greenery, was Lisa. My wife. She wasn't alone. Sitting across from her was a man I vaguely recognized, a face from our past. As I took a second look, I remembered, her college classmate, Eric. They were leaning in close, their heads nearly touching as they talked. Her laughter, light and musical, floated through the room, a sound I hadn't heard in our home for what felt like years. The way she smiled at him, her hand brushing his as it rested on the table, left no room for misinterpretation. My stomach churned as my chest tightened, each passing second hammering home the truth. For a fleeting moment, I thought about confronting them, walking up to the table and demanding an explanation. But then I saw the way Eric reached for her hand, holding it gently between his, and how she didn't pull away. The sight froze me in place. I didn't need to hear their conversation to understand what this was. My presence there wouldn't salvage anything, it would only humiliate me further. I turned on my heel and walked out, every step heavier than the last. Out on the street, I leaned against my car, the cool night air doing nothing to quell the heat of anger and betrayal coursing through me. I pulled out my phone, my hands trembling as I opened the messaging app. Words began to form on the screen, fueled by equal parts hurt and rage. Lisa, I just saw you with him. Don't bother explaining. There's nothing you could say to undo this. Our marriage is over. Tomorrow, I'll be filing for divorce. Don't come home expecting anything different. Tonight is the last time I let you humiliate me. I stared at the message for a moment, my thumb hovering over the send button. Then, with a deep breath, I pressed it, feeling the tiniest flicker of satisfaction at the small, decisive act. The message was sharp, cruel even, but it was nothing compared to the pain she had just inflicted on me. Driving home, I couldn't stop replaying the image of her and Eric in the restaurant. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my knuckles white, as I tried to make sense of it all. The betrayal wasn't sudden, it never is. I could see now how the pieces fit together, the late nights, the newfound energy she brought to her appearance, the emotional distance that had crept into our lives. The signs had been there all along, but I hadn't wanted to believe them. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my anger had hardened into cold resolve. I marched inside and went straight to the bedroom. Her scent still lingered in the air, a cruel reminder of the life we had once shared. I began packing her things, one by one, methodically stripping the house of her presence. Clothes, shoes, her collection of lotions and perfumes, everything went into a pile by the front door. Each item I placed there felt like reclaiming a piece of my dignity. I didn't stop at her belongings. Every photo of us together, every shared token of our time as husband and wife, was removed. They were no longer memories worth cherishing, they were painful reminders of what I had lost. The only thing I left untouched was our wedding photo on her nightstand, its smiling faces now a cruel joke. Once her things were packed, I sat down in the living room, waiting. The hours stretched on, each one filled with a quiet intensity as I rehearsed what I would say to her. My phone buzzed a few times, messages from Lisa, no doubt, but I didn't bother to look. I didn't need to hear her excuses or explanations. The truth was already clear. The sound of her car pulling into the driveway jolted me out of my thoughts. I straightened up, bracing myself for the confrontation to come. The door opened, and she stepped inside, her face lighting up briefly before falling into confusion as her eyes landed on the pile of her belongings by the door. "Donald?" she asked, her voice laced with uncertainty. "What's going on?" I stood, my expression cold and unyielding. "We need to talk," I said, my voice low but firm. Her eyes darted between me and the pile of her things, and she took a hesitant step forward. "What is this? Why are my things here?" "You already know why," I replied, each word deliberate. "I saw you tonight, Lisa. At the restaurant. With him." Her face paled, and her mouth opened as if to speak, but no words came out. I stepped closer, my eyes never leaving hers. "I sent you a message," I continued, my tone icy. "Our marriage is over, Lisa. Tomorrow, I'll be filing for divorce." Her lips trembled, and for a moment, she looked as though she might cry. "Donald, please." "No," I cut her off sharply. "There's nothing you can say that I want to hear. You've already said enough with your actions." Her hands clenched into fists at her sides, her voice rising with desperation. "It's not what you think, just let me explain." I shook my head, the weight of her betrayal pressing down on me like a crushing wave. "You had plenty of chances to explain, Lisa. You could have told me the truth instead of lying every day. But you didn't. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine." The silence that followed was deafening. She stood there, tears streaming down her face, while I remained unmoving, unwilling to waver in the face of her remorse. Tonight, Lisa would confront the consequences of her choices, and there would be no escaping the reckoning that followed. Lisa stood frozen, her face pale, the tears welling in her eyes threatening to spill over. For a moment, it looked like she might say something else, but she seemed to realize that nothing would work. Nothing could erase what I'd seen, what I now knew. She glanced at the pile of her things near the door, then back at me. The weight of her silence filled the room, a stark contrast to the whirlwind of emotions raging inside me. Finally, she found her voice, though it trembled. "Donald, please. Just, don't do this. Let's sit down and talk about it." I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. "Talk about what, Lisa? How you lied to me for months. How you've been sneaking around with him while I've been here, holding this house together, holding us together." "No, Lisa. We're past talking." Her tears started falling then, and she moved toward me, her hands outstretched like she could fix this with a touch. "It wasn't what it looked like. I swear. Eric and we didn't." "Don't you dare lie to me again," I snapped, my voice louder than I intended. The sound made her flinch, and for a brief moment, I hated myself for the anger, for how raw and unfiltered it had become. But then the memory of her laughing with him, the way she looked at him, surged forward, snuffing out any guilt. I walked to the table and grabbed the envelope I prepared while waiting for her to come home. I tossed it onto the coffee table between us. "There's your divorce notice," I said coldly. I already had the paperwork started weeks ago, but now I'm done dragging my feet. Her hand flew to her mouth as she gasped, a broken sob escaping her lips. "Weeks ago? Donald, why would you even?" "Because I knew," I cut her off. "I've known for a while. You thought you were slick, didn't you? All those late nights, all the new excuses about work, the way your phone was always glued to your hand. Do you think I didn't notice how you suddenly had no time for me? How you stopped looking me in the eye?" She took a step back, her hand still covering her mouth. "It's not like that," she whispered. "It was never supposed to. Donald, I didn't mean to hurt you." I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "Well, congratulations, Lisa, because you didn't just hurt me. You destroyed us." "And for what? Him? Eric? You threw away our entire marriage for a fling with some guy who couldn't even make it past your first year of college." Her tears were falling freely now, and she sat down on the couch, burying her face in her hands. "I was lonely, Donald," she mumbled through her sobs. "You're always so busy with work, and I felt like I didn't matter anymore. Eric was just someone who—" "Don't you dare try to make this my fault," I interrupted, my voice low and deadly. "Don't you even think about playing the victim here, Lisa. You didn't talk to me about how you were feeling. You didn't try to fix what was wrong. You went behind my back. You lied. You cheated." She looked up at me then, her face red and blotchy, her eyes filled with desperation. "It wasn't serious. It didn't mean anything. I was going to end it, Donald. I swear I was. And you're telling me that makes it better?" I shot back. "You don't get to decide when it ends." "I do. And it's ending right now." Lisa jumped to her feet and came toward me again, this time grabbing my arm. "Please," she begged. "Please don't do this. We can fix it. I'll do whatever it takes. Therapy, counseling, whatever you want. I'll never see him again, I promise." I shook her hand off, stepping back as if her touch burned. "It's too late for that, Lisa. You made your choice. And now you're going to live with it." The silence that followed was suffocating. She stood there, tears still streaming, her hands trembling at her sides. I picked up her suitcase and carried it to the front porch, setting it down with a finality that even she couldn't argue with. When I came back inside, Lisa was still standing in the middle of the living room, staring at me like she didn't recognize the man in front of her. And maybe she didn't. The Donald she knew, the Donald who would have forgiven her, who would have worked to fix things no matter how broken they were, was gone. In his place was a man who had finally hit his limit. "You should go," I said quietly, my voice calmer now but no less firm. "Go to him. I'm sure he'll be happy to see you." Her lips trembled, and for a second, I thought she might argue, might refuse to leave. But then she picked up her phone and keys, her movements slow and defeated, and walked to the door. She paused on the threshold, looking back at me one last time. "I'm sorry," she whispered. But I didn't answer. I just stood there, watching as she disappeared into the night, leaving behind the shattered pieces of a life that would never be whole again. After Lisa left, the silence in the house was deafening. I stood there in the dim light of the living room, staring at the door as if expecting it to swing open again. But it didn't. She was gone. I wanted to feel relief, like some weight had been lifted from my chest. Instead, all I felt was anger. Not the fiery kind that burns out quickly, but a cold, steady rage that settled deep in my bones. I walked over to the couch and sat down, my head in my hands. The wedding photo still sat on the mantel, mocking me with its frozen smiles and promises of a life we'd never have now. Part of me wanted to smash it, to shatter that perfect image the same way Lisa had shattered our marriage. But I didn't. Not yet. It was a reminder of what she destroyed, and I wasn't ready to let it go. The truth was, the whole thing didn't sit right. Lisa's apology, her sudden promises to do anything to fix things, it felt hollow. Like she was scrambling to save face more than she actually cared about saving us. And Eric? The guy she'd thrown away everything for. I couldn't believe she'd risked our life for someone like him. But then again, people don't cheat because they're thinking straight. They cheat because they're selfish. I tried to distract myself, flipping through channels on the TV, but nothing held my attention. My mind kept going back to her face, the way it crumpled when she saw her things packed up by the door. I wanted to believe she was sorry, but something about her reaction nagged at me. Was it regret over hurting me, or regret that she got caught? The difference mattered, and I was starting to think it was the latter. At some point, I grabbed my phone and scrolled back to that damned message I sent her. "Lisa, I just saw you with him. Don't bother explaining. There's nothing you could say to undo this. Our marriage is over. Tomorrow, I'll be filing for divorce. Don't come home expecting anything different. Tonight is the last time I let you humiliate me." The words stared back at me, cold and final. For a moment, I wondered if I'd been too harsh. But no, she'd earned every word. Still, the thought of filing for divorce tomorrow felt surreal. Just yesterday, I thought we'd grow old together. Now, all I could think about was how to erase her from my life. I decided to call my brother, Mike. He'd always been the no-nonsense one in the family, the guy who called it like he saw it. If anyone could talk me down or give me clarity, it was him. The phone rang a few times before his familiar gruff voice answered. "Donald? It's late, man. Everything okay?" I let out a bitter laugh. "Depends on what you call okay. Lisa's gone." "Gone?" He sounded more alert now. "What do you mean gone? Did something happen?" "Yeah," I said, leaning back on the couch. "She happened. I caught her on a date tonight. With her old college classmate, Eric. You remember him?" Mike was silent for a second. Then, "That guy. Are you kidding me? What the hell, Don? What did you do?" I sent her a message telling her we're done. Told her I'm filing for divorce tomorrow. Packed up her stuff and left it by the door. She came home, tried to beg me to give her another chance, but I didn't let her. I told her to leave. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Damn," Mike said finally. "I don't even know what to say. You sure about the divorce?" "Absolutely." My voice was firm, but inside, doubt was starting to creep in. "Well, I'll back you up no matter what, but," Mike hesitated. "Don't make any big moves when you're this worked up. Sleep on it. And Don, if she tries to twist this, if she starts pulling sympathy cards, you need to stay strong. She made her choice, not you." I thanked him and hung up, but his words stuck with me. Lisa twisting things, that was a real possibility. She'd always been good at spinning stories, making people see her as the victim even when she wasn't. And now that I'd called her out, I couldn't shake the feeling that she'd try to turn this around on me somehow. My thoughts were interrupted by a buzz from my phone. It was a message from an unknown number. I frowned and opened it, my pulse quickening when I read the words. "You don't know the whole story. Call me when you're ready to hear it." There was no name, no context, but something about the message made my stomach twist. My first thought was Eric, maybe he was trying to stir things up, add insult to injury. Or maybe it was Lisa, reaching out through someone else's number to get around me blocking her. Either way, I wasn't biting. I deleted the message and tossed the phone onto the coffee table. But as I sat there, the words kept bouncing around in my head. What didn't I know? And why did whoever sent it think I'd care? I stared at the mantel again, at that damned wedding photo, and made a decision. Tomorrow wasn't just going to be about filing divorce papers. Tomorrow, I'd find out exactly how deep this betrayal went. I wasn't just going to walk away, I was going to make sure Lisa and Eric couldn't hurt me again. Whatever it took. The next morning came way too quickly. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lisa and Eric sitting there in that restaurant, laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. By the time the sun came up, I was running on caffeine and spite, and honestly, that was enough to keep me going. I spent the morning gathering everything I'd need to file the divorce papers. Our marriage license, financial records, proof of her affair, all of it was already organized in a folder I'd started weeks ago, back when the late nights and the secrecy had first made me suspicious. I thought I'd feel some kind of satisfaction as I got everything in order, but the truth was, I just felt tired. Tired of being the guy who gave his all to someone who clearly didn't care enough to do the same. Midway through packing up the folder, my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. I almost ignored it, thinking it was spam, but something about the timing made me pause. I picked it up and saw another message. "You're making a mistake. Call me before you do something you'll regret." My stomach twisted. Was this Eric? Or maybe someone on Lisa's side, trying to guilt me into giving her another chance? Either way, I wasn't interested in playing games. I deleted the message without responding and went back to my preparations. By the time I left for the courthouse, I felt like I was in a daze. Everything about this felt surreal, like it was happening to someone else. But as I walked into the office and handed over the paperwork, the finality of it hit me like a freight train. This was real. There was no turning back now. When I got home, the house was eerily quiet. Lisa hadn't come back, not that I expected her to, but it still felt strange being there alone. I went to the fridge, grabbed a beer, and sat on the couch, trying to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do next. That's when my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call. Another unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. I swiped to answer, keeping my voice sharp. "Who is this?" There was a pause on the other end, followed by a deep sigh. "Donald. It's Eric." Hearing his voice was like a slap to the face. I sat up straighter, gripping the phone tighter. "You've got some nerve calling me." "Look, no, I'm the last person you want to hear from right now," he said, his tone cautious. "But there's more to this than you think." "Lisa." "Don't," I snapped. "Don't you dare say her name to me. You think I want to hear your excuses? You think anything you say is going to make this better?" "I'm not calling to make excuses," Eric said quickly. "I'm calling because you need to know the truth." I let out a bitter laugh. "The truth?" "The truth is you've been screwing my wife behind my back for months. What could you possibly say that changes that?" There was another pause, and I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end. "You're right," he admitted finally. "I crossed a line. I never should have gotten involved with Lisa. But it wasn't just her, Donald. This isn't just about an affair." "What the hell are you talking about?" I growled. "She's in trouble," he said, his voice low. "And you might be, too." I froze. "What kind of trouble?" "I can't explain it all over the phone," Eric said. "But I'm not the only one Lisa's been lying to. There's a lot you don't know about her, things that could come back to bite you if you're not careful." His words sent a chill down my spine, but I forced myself to stay calm. You think I'm just going to take your word for it? After everything you've done? No, Eric said quietly. That's why I'm asking you to meet me. I'll explain everything. You can decide for yourself whether or not to believe me. Every instinct in me screamed to hang up the phone, to tell him to go to hell and never call me again. But the way he said it, the fear in his voice, made me hesitate. Something about this wasn't adding up, and as much as I hated Eric, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was telling the truth. Fine, I said finally. But you'd better not waste my time. We arranged to meet at a diner on the edge of town, the kind of place where no one would pay attention to two guys having a tense conversation. As I drove there, my mind raced with possibilities. What could Lisa be hiding? And how the hell had Eric gotten involved? When I arrived, Eric was already there, sitting in a booth near the back. He looked nervous, fidgeting with the edge of his coffee cup. Seeing him in person made my blood boil, but I pushed the anger down and slid into the booth across from him. Start talking, I said coldly. He nodded, his hands shaking slightly as he set the cup down. I know you have no reason to trust me, but I swear, I'm telling you this because you need to know. Lisa's been lying to both of us. And it's not just about the affair. There's something bigger going on, something dangerous. I folded my arms, glaring at him. You've got 2 minutes. Make it count. Eric took a deep breath and leaned in closer. It's about her finances, Donald. She's been hiding money, moving it around in ways that don't make sense. At first, I thought it was just guilt, like she was planning to leave you and needed a backup plan. But then I found out about the loans. Loans? I asked, frowning. Big ones, Eric said grimly. From some people who don't play nice when it comes to repayment. She's in deep, Donald. And if she can't pay them back, they're not going to stop with her. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore. It was something darker, something I hadn't seen coming. And as much as I hated Eric, I couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in my gut that he might be right. The drive back home felt unreal. Eric's words replayed in my head, each one hitting like a sledgehammer. Lisa was in trouble, real trouble, and by extension, so was I. The woman I'd spent years of my life with wasn't just a cheater, she was someone I didn't even recognize. Financial schemes, dangerous loans, shady dealings, it all painted a picture of a person I couldn't reconcile with the wife I thought I knew. When I pulled into the driveway, the house felt darker than usual, as if it could sense the storm brewing inside me. I walked in and locked the door behind me, my mind racing. 1,000 thoughts crowded my head. Should I call Lisa? Confront her? Call the cops? But I knew this wasn't something I could just talk my way out of, or report and walk away from. Eric was right about one thing, whoever she was dealing with wouldn't care about apologies or explanations. As I stood in the quiet living room, my phone buzzed. I pulled it out of my pocket, half expecting another cryptic message. Instead, it was Lisa. She was calling. My hand hovered over the screen for a moment before I answered. What do you want? I said, my voice cold. Donald, her voice cracked, and for a moment, she sounded like the woman I married, not the one who betrayed me. I need to talk to you. Can I come home? I hesitated, the anger bubbling up again. Why, Lisa? So you can lie to me some more. What could you possibly say to fix this? I'm not trying to fix anything, she said quickly. I need to explain. Please, Donald. It's important. I clenched my jaw, debating whether to hang up, but something in her tone stopped me. It wasn't just desperation, it was fear. Real, gut-wrenching fear. Fine, I said sharply. Come back. But don't think for a second I'm going to let you off the hook. The line went dead, and I stared at the phone for a long moment before tossing it onto the couch. My hands were shaking, but I wasn't sure if it was from anger, fear, or something else entirely. Whatever Lisa was about to say, I had a feeling it was going to change everything. It wasn't long before I heard her car pull up. I stood in the doorway, watching as she stepped out, her face pale and drawn. She didn't look like the confident, laughing woman I'd seen at the restaurant. She looked like someone running out of time. She walked up the steps slowly, her eyes darting around like she was afraid someone was watching. When she reached the door, I stepped aside to let her in, but I didn't say a word. She walked into the living room and sat down on the edge of the couch, wringing her hands. "Talk," I said, crossing my arms. She looked up at me, her eyes red and glassy. "Donald, I screwed up. I know I did. I don't even know how to begin to make this right." "You can start by telling me the truth," I said, my voice icy. "All of it. No more games." She nodded, taking a shaky breath. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," she began. I borrowed some money a couple of years ago. I thought I could pay it back, but things spiraled out of control. And then Eric, he was just someone I turned to because I didn't know what else to do." I scoffed, the bitterness spilling over. "You turned to Eric? For what? Moral support? Or was it just easier to lie to both of us?" "Donald, please," she said, her voice breaking. "These people, they're dangerous. I didn't know how serious it was when I borrowed the money, but now they're threatening me. They said if I don't pay them back soon, they'll come after me, and after you." The weight of her words hit me like a punch to the gut. "Me? What the hell do I have to do with this?" "They know we're married," she said quietly. "They said they'd find any way to make me pay. That includes you." I stared at her, the rage boiling beneath the surface. "So, let me get this straight. You cheated on me, lied to me, and now you've dragged me into your mess with a bunch of criminals. And you thought I'd just, what? Save you?" Her head dropped, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. For a moment, I almost felt pity. Almost. "What do they want, Lisa?" I demanded. "How much?" 200,000, she whispered. I barked out a humorless laugh. 200 grand. Are you out of your mind? Do I look like I have that kind of money lying around?" I didn't know what else to do, she cried, looking up at me with wide, tear-filled eyes. "Donald, they're serious. They'll hurt me. They'll hurt you." I stepped back, running a hand through my hair. The anger, the betrayal, the sheer absurdity of the situation, it was all too much. But beneath it all, a cold, clear realization settled in. "You're on your own," I said finally, my voice low and firm. "You made this mess, and now you're going to clean it up. Don't think for a second I'm going to bail you out after everything you've done." She froze, her eyes widening in horror. "Donald, please. I'm begging you. Get out," I snapped, pointing to the door. "Take your mess, take your lies, and get the hell out of my house." She sobbed as she stumbled to her feet, her hands trembling as she grabbed her purse. She looked back at me one last time, her face crumpling in despair. "I'm sorry," she whispered. But I didn't answer. I watched as she walked out the door, her silhouette disappearing into the night. This time, I didn't feel anger or pity, just a cold, hollow finality. Lisa was gone. And so was the life we built together. For the first time in months, the house was silent. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could finally breathe.